Hello and welcome to the Azure CSP workshop. In this video training session, we will work through sizing, pricing and building an Azure solution for a fictitious company. My name is Daniel Baker and I'm the Partner Development and Learning Specialist for Microsoft here in the UK. I have over 20 years experience in IT, 17 of which as a Microsoft certified trainer specializing in public and private clouds. If you have any questions or feedback, then please feel free to reach out to me either through email or Twitter because I'm always happy to hear from you. So before we start, let's take stock of where we are today. Azure's explosive growth has been phenomenal. We now have over 5 million organizations using our cloud service and more than 125,000 net new subscriptions each month. We are the global leader in digital transformation with over 85% of the Fortune 500 companies choosing our services. We now have over 500 million Azure Active Directory users with over 2,500 SaaS integrated applications. This is tied in with an extensible marketplace offering of over 3,600 solutions. But what drives our success is innovation. We continue to push the boundaries of cloud computing with over 600 additions to our cloud services within the last 12 months alone, all running on a hybrid hyperscale platform that is unmatched by our competitors. Now is the time to embrace the Microsoft Cloud. So let's walk through the course. It will be split into two sessions, typically split over 2 days. On the first day, we will investigate the CSP framework, introduce our fictitious company before looking at our design goals and understanding the components required. We will investigate how to size and price the solution, as well as allowing time for any third-party offerings to be discussed. On day 2, we will build the solution as a proof of concept in Azure. Let's begin by understanding the CSP framework. Today we are in the middle of a revolution with business computing, a paradigm shift in thinking whereby consumers are moving to a utility-based computing model. This technology revolution enables businesses to exactly align technology expenditure with their requirements, allowing them to scale from single to multiple deployments instantly and only ever paying for the amount consumed. IT departments can dynamically scale processing, memory, and storage and deploy templated solutions from an extensive marketplace repository. If the IDC are correct, this momentum will reach an annual cloud market forecast of around 500 billion by 2020, which presents a huge opportunity for both Microsoft and our partners. Microsoft's corporate mission is to enable every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. But we can't do that alone, so we built the Cloud Solution Provider Program to help us meet the needs of our customers and help our partners build a profitable business in the cloud by putting them in the middle of the relationship, delivering on solution success, and managing the business relationship. In essence, you become the trusted advisor and manage the end-to-end customer relationship, white labeling our services and adding your own solutions to meet the needs of your customers and accelerate their cloud journey. To find out more about the CSP program, please review the following 5 short tutorials. I will include these links in the video repository of this training course. Let's now take a look at Contoso, our fictitious company that we will use for the remainder of this course. Contoso is a small yet promising startup company that wishes to build its information technology solution within the Microsoft Cloud. Although small, they are ambitious and require an agile solution that will dynamically scale to meet the business need. You have been invited into the company to discuss the possible IaaS and PaaS components required to meet their goals and have been asked to place specific emphasis on authentication, connectivity, social presence, business continuity, and security. You will need to correctly identify, size, and price the solution before building and deploying a proof of concept for evaluative purposes. Your design will include the following components: a virtual network used to control internal IP address allocation, a virtual network gateway for connecting a point-to-site connection for remote administration, 2 Windows 2012 R2 data center virtual machines controlled by desired state configuration policies, the required storage necessary to host the virtual machines and log in data, a web app for social presence, and a backup solution. As we work through the following slides, we will look at these components in more detail. So let's start understanding the components that we will be using. We will begin by understanding the underlying technologies of the cloud platform. The infrastructure for your cloud solution is typically made up of many components. This may include virtual machines, storage accounts and virtual networks, or perhaps a web app, database server, and even third-party services. You don't see these components as separate entities. Instead, you see them as related and interdependent parts of a single entity that you want to deploy, manage, and monitor as a group. Azure Resource Manager enables you to work with these resources through templates that work for different environments such as testing, staging, and production. On top of this, Resource Manager provides security, auditing, and tagging features to help you manage your resources after deployment. To summarize, Resource Manager provides several benefits. Firstly, you can deploy, manage, and monitor all of the resources for your solution as a group rather than handling these resources individually. You can repeatedly deploy your solution throughout the development lifecycle and have confidence that your resources are deployed in a consistent state. You can manage your infrastructure through declarative templates rather than scripts. You can define the dependencies between resources so that they are deployed in the correct order. You can apply access control to all services in your resource group through role-based access control policies, which are natively integrated into the management platform. You can then apply tags to resources to logically organize the resources in your subscription. And finally, you can clarify your organization's billing by viewing the cost for a group of resources that are sharing the same tag. One of the fundamental components of Resource Manager is a resource group. A resource group is a container that holds related resources for an Azure solution. The resource group can include all of the resources for a solution or only those resources that you want to manage as a group. The reality is you decide how you want to allocate resources to a resource based on what makes the most sense for your organization. There are some important factors to consider when defining your resource group. Firstly, all the resources in your group should share the same lifecycle. You'll deploy, update, and delete them together. So if one resource, such as a database server, needs to exist on a different deployment lifecycle, then this resource should be in a separate resource group. Next, each resource can only exist in one resource group. You can then add or remove a resource to a resource group at any time. You can also move a resource from one resource group to another. It's also important to note that a resource group can contain resources that reside in different regions, and they can be used to scope access control for administrative actions. Finally, a resource can interact with resources in other resource groups. This interaction is common when the two resources are related but do not share the same life cycle. For example, web apps connecting to a backend database. When creating a resource group, you need to provide a location for that resource group. This is because the resource group stores metadata about the resources, so the location is effectively specifying where that metadata is stored. So let's jump into our subscription and take a look at creating a resource group. From here, if I click on G and R, this is going to open up my resource group shortcut. From here, I'm going to go ahead and click on Add. Now from here, you can see it's asking for a resource group name, the subscription that I want to be using, and the resource group location. So I'm going to go ahead and call this CSP Workshop. We can see that it's happy with that information. I'm going to choose my MSDN Visual Studio subscription, and I'm going to place this resource group into North Europe. And if you cast your mind back, that is for the metadata information. With that done, I'm going to choose to pin to dashboard, and I'm going to hit create. Now that will take a second or two, and we can see that that resource group has now been created. With that, let's take a look at some of the options. So under overview, you can see that we have our essentials. From here, we can see the subscription, the last deployments, the subscription ID, and the location. From here, we can go down and we can look at our activity log. And from here, we can go in and filter the activity there. We can choose and customize role-based access control and specify who has access to it. We can specify our tags, which allow us to control automation and cost control. And then as we come down under settings, we have a whole bunch of options. We have quick start, which allows us to go in, find out what we can do in the resource group, use some tools, or find more information through azure.com. We can see the resource costs that are associated with that resource group. We can see any deployments that have been deployed within that resource group. And we can drill down and get a more detailed view of the properties. From here, we can see locks that have been placed on any of the resources, and we can generate an automation script that would allow us to redeploy a later stage. From there, we can go into monitoring. We can look at our metrics and any insights that have come from the resource group. We can look at alert rules that have maybe been set and triggered, any diagnostic logs, any application insights. We can tie this in with Operation Management Suite, and we can also do a log search. From here, if we're having problems, we can also generate a new support request with the Microsoft support team. So as we just seen in the demo, with Resource Manager, we can create templates that define the infrastructure and configuration of our Azure solution. By using templates, we can repeatedly deploy the solution throughout its life cycle and have confidence that our resources are deployed in a consistent state. What's more, you can experience easy deployments from a growing community of contributors within the Azure and Git repositories. When you create a solution from the portal, the solution automatically includes a deployment template. You can also retrieve templates from existing resources by exporting the current state of the resource group or viewing the template used for a particular deployment. This is a helpful way and useful tip to learn about template syntax. So let's quickly jump back into our virtual machine and take a look at some of these templates. Now, it's a blank subscription, so we don't have anything pre-created. But what I can do is I can go ahead and look at my Git repository. And from here, you can see that we have a number of template solutions that we can import into our Azure subscription. So let's scroll down and we'll maybe look at a simple Linux virtual machine. Now, if I click on this template, the Git repository is going to allow me to do two things. It's going to allow me to visualize and then deploy into my Azure subscription. Let's begin by visualizing. So I'll open that in a new tab, and it's going to load the ArmViz IO Designer. And from here, we can see that we've got the virtual machine. We've also got the network interface card, the virtual network, the public IP address, and the storage account. So that resource provider is called on a number of additional resource providers to provide the components for this solution. From there, if we go into deploy to Azure, then that template will extract from the Git repository and will import itself into my Azure subscription. From there, what it will do is it will present me with a number of options to name and configure that virtual machine. Okay, so we can see that that template has been added into my subscription. It's showing me the subscription details. It wants to know the resource group that I perhaps want to put it into. So if I chose existing, I could drop down and select my CSP workshop. It then automatically populates the location. From there, it wants to know my administrator username, my administrator password, the name of the virtual machine and the DNS label, the version of Linux that I want to use. At that point, I can agree to the terms and conditions and begin to purchase that solution. Now, when they talk about purchase the solution, they're talking about the monetary commit that we have to the compute, storage, and network resources. Resource Manager provides a tagging feature that enables you to categorize resources according to your requirements for managing or billing. We use tags when we have a complex collection of resource groups and resources and need to visualize those assets in a way that makes most sense to us. For example, we could tag resources that serve a similar role within our organization or perhaps belong to the same department. Without tags, it may be difficult to later identify and manage resources that have been created and not correctly identified for a particular project scope. Therefore, tagging can be an important way for you to reduce unnecessary costs in your subscription. It's important to note that resources do not need to reside in the same resource group to share a tag. You can also create your own tag taxonomy to ensure that all users in your organization use common tags rather than users inadvertently applying their own. When you create an Azure subscription, you will automatically create an Azure Active Directory tenant, Microsoft's cloud-based directory and identity management service. Azure AD provides an affordable, easy-to-use solution to give employees and business partners single sign-on access to thousands of cloud SaaS-based applications such as Office 365, Salesforce, and Dropbox. Azure AD also includes a full suite of identity management capabilities, including multi-factor authentication, device registration, self-service password and group management, privileged account management, role-based access control, application usage monitoring, auditing and security monitoring, and finally alerting. These capabilities can help secure cloud-based applications, streamline IT processes, cut costs, and help ensure that corporate compliance goals are met. It's important to stress that every Office 365, Azure, and Dynamics CRM tenant is actually already an Azure AD tenant. What's more, with just a handful of clicks, Azure AD can be integrated with an existing on-premises Active Directory, giving organizations the ability to leverage their existing on-premises identity investments to manage access to cloud-based SaaS applications. By using Azure AD, you can quickly adopt cloud services, providing employees and partners with an easy single sign-on experience powered by Azure AD's fully automated SaaS app access management and provisioning service capabilities. You can also empower employees with access to world-class cloud apps and self-service capabilities from wherever they need to work on the devices that they love to use. From there, we can easily and securely manage employee and vendor access to your corporate social media accounts. We can improve application security with Azure AD multi-factor authentication and conditional access. We can implement consistent self-service application access management, enabling business owners to move quickly while cutting IT costs and overheads. We can then monitor application usage and protect our businesses from advanced threats with security reporting and monitoring. And finally, we can secure mobile access to on-premise applications. So let's jump into our subscription and take a look at some of the features of Azure Active Directory. So if I come along here and click on Azure Active Directory, it's going to open up a new blade. From here, we can see that I have a number of options. So I've got my overview where I can see my users and groups. I've got my quick tasks down here. I can set up Active Directory synchronization. I can register SaaS-based applications. And then from here, I can go in and I can set up for self-service password resets. I can do some company branding on there for a personalized logon authentication experience. I've got my news, and I've got a whole bunch of other capabilities such as identity protection, privileged identity management, and cloud app discovery. If I go ahead and click on users and groups, from here we can see the users that I have in my organization, and I can go ahead and I can look at all users, and we can see that I've got myself in there, but it would allow me to go ahead and create a new user in there with profiles and properties and assign them to groups if I wish to do so. If I go ahead and click on this user, I get a breakdown of the user object. So I can see the overview, I can see the user sign-ins, I've got a profile of that user, I can see the directory role for that user. So this particular user is going to be a global administrator. I can see what groups that user is a member of, any resources that are assigned to this user, and I can see the activities such as sign-ins and activity logs. Now again, this is looking fairly blank because it's a brand new subscription. If I come down, if we move back, I can select Enterprise Applications. From here, I can add application from a repository. I can add application proxies and again monitor the activity to those SaaS-based apps. I can come down, I've got app registrations. I can set this machine up for synchronization back to my on-premises resources by setting up AD Connect. I can configure my own domain name. So you can see on here, I've got my onmicrosoft.com, but I've also got my own domain in here under danielbaker.info. I can set up password resets, okay, and it gives me the rationale on why I might want to do that. I can configure my company branding. I can configure my user settings. So users are allowed apps to access their data. They can add gallery apps to on the access panel. They can register their own applications. They can invite guests. And again, I have the ability to control all of this. From here, I've got my global properties. I've got my activity information again, and from here I've got some security, which is obviously expanded depending on the pricing tier that I purchase. So I can see the users that may be at risk, and I can see any risky sign-ins that may have occurred. As discussed previously, Azure Active Directory comes in 4 editions: Free, Basic, Premium P1, and Premium P2. The free tier is included with all Azure subscriptions and offers a free directory service for up to 500,000 objects. This provides single sign-on support for 10 applications and self-service password changes, in addition to on-premises password sync and security reporting. The basic tier is designed for task workers with cloud-first needs. This edition provides cloud-centric application access and self-service identity management solutions. With the basic edition of Azure Active Directory, you get productivity enhancing and cost reducing features like group-based access management, self-service password reset for cloud applications, and Azure Active Directory application proxy. This enables you to publish on-premise web applications using Azure Active Directory. These are all backed by an enterprise level service level agreement of 99.9% uptime. Azure Active Directory Premium is designed to empower organizations with more demanded identity and access management needs. This first premium tier edition adds feature-rich enterprise-level identity management capabilities and enables hybrid users to seamlessly access on-premises and cloud capabilities. This edition includes everything you need for information worker and identity administrators in hybrid environments across application access, self-service identity access management, identity protection, and security in the cloud. It supports advanced administration and delegation such as dynamic groups and self-service group management. It also includes Microsoft's Identity Manager and provides cloud write-back capabilities, enabling solutions like self-service password reset for your on-premises users. Azure Active Directory Premium is also offered in a second tier, designed with advanced protection for all of your users and administrators. This new offering includes all of the capabilities in Azure AD Premium P1, as well as our new identity protection, privileged identity management services. Azure Active Directory Identity Protection leverages billions of signals to provide risk-based conditional access to your applications and critical company data. We also help you manage and protect privileged accounts with Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management so you can discover, restrict, and monitor administrators and their access to resources, and in addition to this, provide just-in-time access when needed. So let's go ahead and click on our calculator to look at the pricing page. Okay, so that's redirected us to the Azure Active Directory pricing. From here, we can go in and select our region. We can also select our currency. And if I drill down on this page, we can have a look at the different tiers. So we can see the common features. We've got our directory objects. We've got user and group management, single sign-on, self-service password change, and sync back. We look at the security reports. We can see that the free and basic have a limited number of reports, but as we move into premium, we have a number of advanced reports in there too. As we look at the premium and basic features, we can see that more functionality is added to the product, such as group-based access management, self-service password reset for cloud users, branding, application proxy, and here's where we begin to get our service level agreements. From here, we can look at the premium features and we can see things like we've got cloud app discovery, connection health, conditional access, automatic password rollover, identity protection, and so on. We can also see that we've got Azure Active Directory join for Windows 10 based machines. So it will allow us to join a device into Azure AD. And we've also got MDM auto enrollment with self-service BitLocker recovery for our Windows 10 devices. Now, if I continue to scroll down, we can see what our costs are. So for basic, we've got from 61 pence per user per month. If we go into premium, it goes up to £3.60. If we go up to premium P2, into £5.49p. So now we've seen Azure Active Directory, I want to shift focus and explore virtual networks. Now, an Azure Virtual Network, or VNet as it's sometimes called, is a representation of your own network in the cloud. This is a logical isolation of the Azure cloud dedicated to your subscription, whereby you fully control the IP address blocks, DNS settings, security policies, and route tables. You can also further segment your VNet into subnets and launch Azure IaaS virtual machines and PaaS instances, in addition to connecting to your on-premises network using one of the connectivity options available. Virtual network benefits include isolation, whereby VNets are completely isolated from one another. This allows you to create disjoint networks for development, testing, and production that all use the same classless inter-domain routing address blocks. Next, it allows us access to the public internet, whereby all IaaS virtual machines and PaaS instances in a VNet can access the public internet by default. Now, obviously, you can control access to this by using network security groups, which we will look at later. Next, we can access VMs within the VNet. So PaaS instances and IaaS virtual machines can be launched in the same virtual network, and they can connect to each other using private IP addresses, even if they're in different subnets, without the need to configure gateways or use public IP addresses. Next, we have name resolution, whereby Azure provides internal name resolution for IaaS virtual machines and PaaS instances deployed in our VNet. But on top of this, we can also deploy our own DNS servers and configure the VNet to use them. Next, we look at security. Traffic entering and exiting the virtual machine and PaaS instances within a VNet can be controlled using network security groups. And finally, connectivity. VNets can be connected to each other using a network gateway or VNet peering. VNets can be connected to on-premises data centers through site-to-site VPN networks or Azure Express Route. We can also use point-to-site VPN connections for singular authenticated connections for our remote users. Virtual networks in Azure are free and have an allowance of up to 50 VNets per subscription. As a rule of thumb, you should ensure that you have created a VNet before deploying any IaaS or PaaS instances into your Azure environment. ARM-based VMs do require a VNet, so if not specified, Azure will create a default VNet that could potentially have a side or address block clash with your on-premises resources. It is for this reason correct preparation and IP planning should be part of your initial design consultation. In the following slides, we will examine the different options available with Azure Virtual Networks. We begin by discussing a subnet. Now, a subnet is a range of IP addresses within the virtual network. You can divide a VNet into multiple subnets for organization and security needs. VMs and PaaS instances deployed into subnets within a VNet are able to communicate with each other without any extra configuration. You can also configure route tables and network security groups to a subnet to control additional access. We'll next discuss IP addresses. Now, there are two types of IP addresses assigned to resources in Azure. These addresses are public and private. Public IP addresses allow Azure resources to communicate with Internet and other Azure public-facing services such as the Azure Redis Cache and Azure Event Hubs. Private IP addresses, on the other hand, allow for communication between resources within a virtual network, along with those connected through a VPN connection back to an on-premise resource. The Azure Load Balancer delivers high availability and network performance to your applications by distributing traffic among healthy service instances. Virtual machines and cloud services within a VNet can be exposed to the internet by using the Azure Load Balancer. For line of business applications that are internal facing, internal load balancers can also be used. Finally, network security groups control inbound and outbound access to network interface cards, virtual machines, and subnets. Now, each network security group contains one or more rules specifying whether or not traffic is approved or denied based on source IP address, source port, or its destination equivalence. So let's jump into our virtual machine, and what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at building a virtual network. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my resource group, and from there I'm going to go ahead and click Add. Now from here, that's taken me into the marketplace. And again, we said we have over 3,600 solutions in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in that I want a virtual network. And we can see that as I type in, that's presented itself as one of the options. From there, I'm going to select virtual network and I'm going to choose to deploy via resource manager. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create. That's going to open up a new blade. From here, I'm going to type in the name of my VNet. So I'm going to call this CSP VNet. And then from there, it wants to know my address space. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use a Class C address space of 192.168.10/24. At that point, I want to select my subnet name, and I'm going to call this subnet production for my production machines, and I want to go ahead and subdivide my network address space into a smaller number. So I'm going to choose 192.168.10/25, and you'll see that that will now allow me 128 addresses in there. What it also means is I still have 128 addresses that I can play with for maybe a development subnet or a reserved subnet for a gateway. From here, I'm going to select the subscription that I want to use. And again, I'm going to use my MSDN subscription. And I want to choose to use an existing resource group called CSP Workshop, which is located in North Europe. From here, I'm going to go ahead and pin this resource to my dashboard. And I'm going to go ahead and hit create. Now that will take a moment to create, but through the power of video editing, I've paused the video and now we've come back when that's ready. So from here, we can see that we've got our virtual network. And again, let's just explore the options that we have. So under overview, I can see my essentials, again, dictating the resource group I'm in, the location and the subscription name. We can also see the IP address space that we've put in, and we've chosen to use the Azure provided DNS service. Now at this point, it's listed no connected devices. From here, I've got my activity log, I've got my access control and my tags, I've got my address space, my connected devices, I've also got subnets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down into my subnet and I want to go ahead and create some more. So from here, if I wanted to create a new subnet for development, I could come across and hit subnet. From here, I give it a name of development, and I'm going to go ahead and give this an address space of /26, and what that does for me is that's now going to give me 64 potential machines that I can create within this development subnet. From here, I can place a network security group on there, and that's going to control inbound and outbound IP and source ports. I can also specify route tables if need be. At this point, I'm just going to go ahead and say OK, and that's now created. So you can see under my address space, I now have 2 subnets. I'm going to create one last subnet for my gateway. I'm going to leave it with the default CIDR address block, which will give me 16 addresses for my gateway router. At that point, I'm going to hit OK, and again, that will then create and populate under my subnet. So we'll just give that one a second, and we can see that that's now created. Now at this point, I can come down to DNS servers. I can choose whether I want to use the Azure default provided DNS server, or do I want to create my own custom one? And at this point, I can enter the IP information of it. I can come down to VNet peerings, which would allow me to join multiple VNets together. I've got the properties or detailed properties of that resource, locks, and again, I've got that automation script. So if we click on the automation script, now we've begun creating resources in there. We can see that I'm getting that template file that I can either download, add to my template library, or redeploy. I also have the option of clicking on diagram to find out what components are within that resource, as well as creating a new support request. What's also important to note now is if I go back into my initial resource group, you can see that it's starting to list components. And again, if I come down to the automation script for the resource group, you can see that that template file is beginning to compile. You can connect the virtual network to your on-premises network using one of the connectivity options listed on slide. This can include access via a public face IP address on the provisioned VM, a secure tunnel access on an individual machine using point-to-site connection, or complete site routing via site-to-site connectivity. You also have the ability to peer VNets within a subscription to facilitate routing, in addition to establishing a dedicated private pipe to your cloud resources via ExpressRoute. In essence, you can expand your network to Azure with complete control and benefit from the enterprise scale functionality that Azure provides. Microsoft Azure ExpressRoute lets you extend your on-premises network into the Microsoft Cloud over a dedicated private connection. This allows connections to various cloud services such as Azure, Office 365, and CRM Online. This is all from a point-to-point or virtual cross-connection via a connectivity provider. ExpressRoute connections do not go over the public internet, meaning that customers can expect more reliability, faster speeds, lower latencies, and higher security than other connectivity options. All inbound data transfers are free of charge, and all outbound data transfers are charged based on a predetermined rate. However, it's important to note that users are also charged a fixed monthly fee based on high availability dual ports. Microsoft also offers an unlimited data plan in which all inbound and outbound data transfers are included within a fixed monthly fee dependent on port speed. Additionally, Microsoft offers a premium add-on which offers increased route limits, global connectivity, and an increased number of virtual networks per circuit. So let's look at setting up a virtual network gateway on our virtual machine. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back into my resource group, and from here I'm going to click on add, and from my marketplace I'm going to search for a virtual network gateway. Okay, so we're going to select virtual network gateway. I'm going to select the top option, virtual network gateway, and from here I'm going to go ahead and hit create. Now from here it's going to want to know a name, so I'm going to call this CSP gateway. It's going to want to know the gateway type. Now, is it VPN, so point to site or site to site, or is it one of those private dedicated ExpressRoute connections? I'm going to leave it as VPN, and we're going to do a route-based connection. Now, under the stop key unit, I'm going to go ahead and select basic for demo purposes, and then from there, I'm going to choose the virtual network that I want to connect to. So the virtual network that we're going to connect to is my CSP virtual network. And from there, I need to give it a public IP address so that I can connect into this virtual machine. So if I click on here, we're going to go ahead and create a brand new virtual IP address. And I'm just going to add this to the end of the name. So CSP gateway IP. Okay, from there, I'm going to say OK. I'm going to leave my existing subscription. My resource group is fine. My location is fine. So I'm going to go ahead and pin that to dashboard. Before I do though, let's just see that, look, I can generate my automation options from there. So I can generate that script again. From here, I'm going to go ahead and click create, and we can see that's validated, and that gateway will now begin to deploy. Now, we need to be realistic here because it's a gateway, because it's building virtual machines and configuring routing and remote access and all of the routes for us. This is going to take time. So if you're following along with this video, you can expect this process to take anywhere between 20 and 40 minutes. So we'll pause the video and we'll come back in a little while. So while we're waiting for our gateway to build, let's review some of the virtual network and gateway pricing. We'll begin with virtual networks. Now, virtual networks in Azure are free of charge. As we said before, every subscription is allowed to create up to 50 virtual networks across all regions. Use of public IP addresses and reserved IP addresses on services inside a virtual network do carry a nominal fee. A public IP address is charged at around £2 per month per address. In terms of reserved IP addresses, the first 5 reserved IP addresses are free. Any additional ones will again be charged at around £2 per month. Network appliances such as a VPN gateway and application gateway that run inside a virtual network will also be charged and discussed in the following slides. Azure load balancers are free of charge but not offered with basic virtual machines. Now, every cloud service gets a free public load balance IP or VIP. If you want to load balance on multiple VIPs, you can get additional ones at a nominal charge of around £2 per month. You can assign up to 5 additional IPs to your load balancer at any one time. As previously discussed, setting up a VNet is free of charge. However, we will charge for the VPN gateway that you use to connect to back on-premise networks and other VNets that you may have created in Azure. This charge is based on the amount of time that the gateway is provisioned and available, and also any egress cost that you may incur. When you create a virtual network gateway, you need to specify the gateway SKU that you want to use. When you select a higher gateway SKU, more CPUs and network bandwidth are allocated to the gateway, and as a result, the gateway can support a higher network throughput. ExpressRoute enables you to create private connections between Azure data centers and your on-premises network. The connections support 3 pricing models: a metered data plan whereby outbound data is charged at a fixed rate per gigabyte, and an unlimited data plan whereby all data is included in the base charge. There is also a premium add-on that supports both models. When considering the cost of egress data, consider that the first 5 gigabytes is free, with additional gigabytes starting as low as 3 pence per gigabyte, depending on the amount consumed. So let's jump back into our virtual machine where we can see that our gateway has now been created and the blade is open up in the portal. From here, let's just take another look. As before, we can see we've got our overview with our essentials, listing resource group, location, subscription, ID, VPN type, etc. We also have our public IP address in there. We've got our activity log, our access control, our tags. We've also got the ability to go in and diagnose and solve problems. Now we come down to settings. We can see any connections in there. We can also go ahead and configure our point to site configuration. Now this one's quite interesting. If we look at our point to site configuration, we can see that we need to specify an address pool, and then we need to put a root certificate into Azure, as well as any revoked certificates that we may want to list. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new address pool, and I'm going to put in the address pool 192.168.20/25. So relatively small address pool to allow people to connect in. I'm not going to put a root certificate here because you'll see that there's no way that I can upload that certificate. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to do this using a PowerShell script. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and hit save and wait for this configuration to update. Okay, and that's now been updated. Our address pool has been accepted. Again, as before, we've got our properties locks. We can generate an automation script. We can also generate a new support request. But what I want to do now is I want to configure the certificates and the connection that's going to allow my computer to connect into this virtual network. So before we do that, let's just clean up our dashboard a little. So I'm just going to change these to a 2x1. and stack the network on top of the gateway. And at that point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come across and jump into the Contoso point-to-site simple.ps1 PowerShell script. Now, I've created this PowerShell script to do a number of things. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to install the latest Azure Resource Manager modules. It's then going to import them into the PowerShell package. We're then going to add our Resource Manager account and select the correct subscription for my one. At that point, I'm going to set the variables. Now you'll notice, look, if I go into my resource group, they all match up. So my resource group is the CSP workshop. The gateway name is the CSP gateway. The gateway IP address is the CSP gateway IP. With that done, with our variable set, what we're going to do is we're going to create the root and client PKI certificates for our authentication. And effectively what that's going to do for us is it's going to create the authentication mechanism between the Azure gateway and our client machine. Now, if I quickly go into a mmc.exe, and we'll add the snap-in. So let's just go down to add snap-in, and we're going to do this for our certificates, for our user account. We should see those certificates create in a moment. So we can see there's nothing in there at the moment, but after running this script, they will create. What will also happen is if I go into my C drive and in my Cloud and Proud delivery files, I will also get those certificates generate in there. Okay, so once we've created the certificates, we're going to go ahead and launch certutil to encode them. We will then upload the root certificate into the virtual gateway and allow ourselves to download this, the VPN client via a URL, which will be presented in this window. So I'm going to go ahead and run this entire script. Now that's going to take a few moments, especially while it installs and imports the Azure module. So let's go ahead and hit run. And at that point, we're going to pause the video and we'll come back when the script is run. Okay, so it's now asking me to authenticate. So we've installed the modules, we've imported the modules. It now wants me to authenticate into my Azure subscription. So I'm going to go ahead and enter my credentials. And it's a personal account. And from here, we'll enter the password. And sign in. Now what will happen is we can see that it's set my subscription. It's now creating my certificates. From there, it's going to encode the certificates. It's going to upload into Azure, and it's going to generate me a URL for the client package. So we can see this is happening in the background. If I go ahead, we can see that those certificates are now populated under my Cloud and Proud. If I quickly go back into my certificate store and hit a refresh, under certificates, we can see that I've got my CSP root and my CSP client. So again, that's all been created successfully. So at this point, we're now at this stage where we're uploading into our virtual gateway. So the root certificate is being published to Azure. So that would just take a moment to upload, and then we'll be presented with a URL. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. So that'll take a minute or two, and then we'll come back when we're ready to continue. And there we go. We can see that that's succeeded. It's being uploaded. So the URL will be along any second now. Okay, and here is our URL. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select that and hit copy. And we're going to go back into our browser and I'm going to paste that URL in. And from there, we can see that executable is now downloaded. We can see that's now in the folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up the command prompt. And I'm going to drag that executable in. And from there, do we wish to install the VPN client for CSP VNet? Yes, we do. And we can now see that we've got a CSP VNet under our network properties. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to click on our VNet connections and hit connect. From here, it's opening up the VNet client. I'm going to hit connect and continue. And that certificate authentication now takes place and we can see that we are connected. What that means is if I go into an IP config, we should see that I now have multiple addresses. I've got my standard IP address for this virtual machine, but I've also now got my VPN address that we specified on the 192.168.20 address space. So with our networking in place, let's now focus on Azure Virtual Machines. Now, Azure Virtual Machines are one of several types of on-demand, scalable computing resources available in Azure. Typically, you'll choose a virtual machine if you need greater control over your computing environment than other cloud services offer. An Azure Virtual Machine gives you the flexibility of virtualization without having to buy and maintain the physical hardware to run it. However, it's still important to note that you will still need to maintain a virtual machine by configuring, patching, and maintaining the software as necessary. Some use cases include development and testing, running applications, extending the data center, and disaster recovery, with images being provided by Microsoft, their partners, or your own generalized builds. When selecting a virtual machine, there are many considerations to take into account. These include the operating system that you wish to run, the number of virtual machines that you wish to provision, the storage and disk IOPS required for the solution, and the total hours that the machines will be active. Microsoft offers one of the largest selections of compute tiers on the market, each with differing capabilities reflected in the pricing model. In the following slides, we will discuss these capabilities in more detail. We begin with the basic tier in the A-Series family. These virtual machines offer an economical low-cost solution for testing and development purposes and therefore not recommended for production workloads due to their throttled IOPS and inability to offer load balancing, auto-scaling, or memory-intensive configurations. Moving to a standard tier offers more options, including an increase to 500 IOPS per disk, internal and external load balancing, and money-saving flexibility with auto-scale capabilities. In addition to these, Microsoft offers specialized instances such as the network-optimized A8 and A9 builds that both offer 32 gigabit per second InfiniBand network connectivity for high bandwidth, low latency data transfers, in addition to the A10 and A11 builds that are optimized for high performance clusters, video encoding, and compute-intensive scenarios. Some workloads, such as databases, have a disk-based cache, and you can greatly increase the performance of dependent applications by placing this cache onto the local solid-state disk offered by the D-Series virtual machines. These machines are positioned for IaaS deployments but can also be used for web and worker role builds in Azure Cloud Services. In addition to this, the D-Series virtual machines offer 60% faster processors than their A-Series counterparts and are ideal for applications that demand high performance from their processors, RAM, and general throughput. Building on the success of the D-Series, the DV2s and the next generation builds that can also be used as virtual machines or cloud services. These machines are equipped with the latest generation Intel Xenon processors and offer a 35% performance increase while carrying the same memory and disk configurations as the older models. Because of this, the DV2 series are an ideal solution for many enterprise-grade applications. The F-Series virtual machines are configured for compute-optimized, low-memory deployments and support 2 GB of RAM and 16 GB of local solid-state storage per CPU core. Personally, for me, this tier represents a much simpler understanding because the numeric value after the series letter now actually represents the number of cores. I realize that this was a cause for confusion and pleased to say that moving forward, all new tier releases will adopt this model. The F-Series can achieve clock speeds of up to 3.1 GHz and are a smart choice for batch processing, web, analytical and gaming scenarios. Next, we look at the G series, which offers the latest Intel Xenon processors, twice the memory and 4 times the solid-state storage of the DV2 tier. This makes these machines the ideal choice for your most demanding applications. The H series is a new family specifically designed to handle high-performance computing workloads such as financial risk modeling, seismic and reservoir simulation, molecular modeling, and genomic research. They are based on the Intel Xenon E5 processors with DDR4 memory. Now, two of the H-series configurations, the H16R and the H16MR, will also carry a second low-latency, high-throughput network interface card, which is optimized and tuned for tightly coupled parallel computing workloads, such as MPI applications. Finally, we look at the N-series builds. Now, these machines are enabled with NVIDIA's cutting-edge GPUs and are split into two categories. With the NC series, which are compute-focused GPUs, you'll be able to run compute-intensive HPC workloads using CUDA or OpenCL. This SKU is powered by Tesla K80 GPUs and offers the fastest computational GPU performance available in the public cloud through discrete device assignment technologies, resulting in close to bare metal performance. In addition to this, the NV series focuses more on visualization and utilizes Tesla M60 GPUs with NVIDIA Grid technology for desktop accelerated applications and VDI. This allows you to visualize graphic-intensive workloads and run single precision workloads such as encoding and rendering. Azure Premium Storage comes with specifically designed virtual machines. This includes the DS, DSV2, FS, GS, HS, and NS series, all to further enhance disk performance. Now, these virtual machines have new caching technology that provides extremely low latency read operations. Also, for your time-critical applications, you can attach multiple persistent disks to deliver up to 64 terabytes of storage and more than 80,000 IOPS per second. This is in addition to the 2000 megabytes per second disk throughput per VM and less than 1 millisecond latency for read operations. So let's jump back into our subscription and build and configure a virtual machine. So to do this, I'm going to go up to Resources and again highlight the fact that this is now starting to populate with the network, the gateway, and the public IP address. We're going to go ahead and we're going to click on Add to launch into our marketplace, and what we're going to look for is a 2012 R2 data center machine, and we can see that we've got Windows Server 2012 R2 data center. So from here, I'm going to click on this machine. I'm going to select this top option here. And from there, I'm going to choose to deploy using Resource Manager. So from there, I'm going to hit Create. I'm going to call this CSP VM1. And my VM disk type, I'm going to opt to use a solid state disk. Now, we're going to look at disks in more detail in a moment, and we'll discuss the pricing thereafter. But for now, I'm going to choose a solid state disk. I'm going to put a username in of student. And I'm going to put in a password. And I'm just going to confirm that password. I'm going to select my Visual Studio Enterprise with MSDN subscription. I'm going to put it into the CSP Workshop resource group, and that's going to be in North Europe. Again, I'm going to hit OK to that, and that will then move us down to the size. So at this point, it's recommending some DS machines. So the DS1, the DS2, and the DS11. If I go into View All, you can see it's going to present me with a number of options in there. But it's worth noting that not every region will support every machine type. At this point, I'm going to choose a DS2 V2. That's going to give me 2 cores, 7 gig of RAM, and 4 additional data disks with a maximum 6400 max IOPS. I've also got a 14 gigabyte local SSD, and it's important to realize what that is. That's actually your volatile temporary storage, and we'll explore this in more detail in a moment. This tier also gives me load balancing and premium disk support, and it will estimate it to cost me around £60 per month. Now again, if you're looking at yours and the price is different, there are different pricing SKUs based on MSDN, EA, and CSP licenses. So I'm going to go ahead and select DSV2. I'm going to hit select, and then it wants me to specify my settings. Now the first thing it's going to do is it wants to generate a storage account. So if I click on my storage account, you can see that it wants a name for the repository for my disk. Now this needs to be unique within the complete URL. So I'm going to try for CSP Workshop VM disk. Okay, and we're going to see if we get a tick, and it's quite happy with that. We're going to go for premium performance, and I'm going to choose locally redundant storage. Now, again, we will go back to the slides, and we will discuss this in more detail. So at that point, I'm going to hit OK. I want it to go onto my CSP virtual network, and more specifically within that production subnet. Now it wants to know, do I want a public IP address? And again, as we said before, that's that public IP address that allows me to connect to that machine from anywhere with an internet connection. Because I have a VNet created and I'm going through that gateway, I'm actually going to choose not to create a public IP address for that virtual machine. Therefore, the only way that I can connect to it is through that VPN connection and that private IP address that I was assigned earlier. It wants to know, do I want a network security group or a firewall to specify access policies into that virtual machine? And again, at this point, if we look at it, it's saying that it's going to allow any traffic through using the remote desktop protocol on transmission control protocol port 3389. It's going to allow that through, but I could lock that down to a certain IP or IP address range. So I'm going to say OK. I'm then going to come down to extensions. So as I click on extensions, what it's going to allow me to choose is, do I want to put on things like custom script extensions? Do I want to install Microsoft anti-malware? Do I want to put Puppet or Chef on there? So it allows me to add from a repository of resources and inject it into that machine build. I'm going to choose at this point not to add any extensions. I'm going to choose not to make this machine highly available. I'm going to also choose that I want monitoring turned on, but I don't want diagnostics for the guest operating system. Now, in order to save my diagnostics, I can either choose to put it into this disk, but it seems a waste. I'm going to choose a lower spec disk. So I'm going to go ahead and say standard performance disk using locally redundant, and I'm going to call this CSP Workshop Diag, and that's fine. So let's see if we get a tick, and we do. Let's say OK, and let's go ahead and say OK. Now at this point, it's going to run through a validation. We can see the validation has passed. There's two things that we can do. At this point, we can launch or we can download the template. So if I just right click and connect into that template, you can see that again it's built that JSON file for me, and it's put all of the parameters in there for me, it's put my variables in there for me, and it's put my resources. And what that means is I can deploy again, I can add it to my template library so I can redeploy with consistent configuration, or I can download and maybe deploy this onto an Azure Stack environment. From there, I'm going to close that and hit OK. And what will happen is that machine will now begin to build. So I'm going to pause the video. We're going to go back to the slides, and we're going to look at some of the virtual machine pricing. So as we discussed, Azure Virtual Machines give you the flexibility of virtualization for a wide range of computing solutions with support for Linux, Windows Server, SQL Server, Oracle, IBM, SAP, and more. Virtual machines are built on a per-minute basis, and most include load balancing and auto-scaling free of charge. Let's click on the calculator and take a look at the prices in more detail. Okay, so it's taken us into virtual machine pricing. Again, we can select the operating system that we want to use, and we've got Oracle in there, we got SQL, we got BizTalk, we got Windows, we got Linux implementations. We can select our region, our currency, and whether we want to display by the hour or the month. Now at that point, we can come down and look at our different virtual machine categories, and we can go in and we've got the A series, we've got the F series, we've got the memory optimized, we've got the NVIDIA series, and we've got the high performance compute. On top of that, it talks about the IP addresses and the instance level IP addresses, the load balancer IP addresses and reserved IP addresses, along with the support and SLA agreements too. So at this point, you can jump in, you can select these machines, and you can push that into your Azure pricing calculator, which we will look at later on in this course. A common question that's asked by customers is the storage included when you size a virtual machine? Although all tiers document at this size, it's important to realize that this disk is simply the temporary volatile volume included for the running of the machine. This disk should not be used for anything other than the page file and performance caching operations. Therefore, when you consider the costings of a VM solution, you will need to take into account any additional operating system and data disk charges. Now, I realize that this is a cause for confusion. Why don't we just package it all under the VM? But when you think about the myriad of configurations that you can have with storage accounts and replication topologies, in addition to disk size and I/O speed, adopting this model allows customers to tailor the solution to meet their specific needs and moves away from a one-size-fits-all mentality. We will look at disk and storage types in the next section of this course. Cloud computing enables new scenarios for applications requiring scalable, durable, and highly available storage for data. In addition to making it possible for developers to build these large-scale applications, Azure Storage also provides the storage foundation for Azure Virtual Machines. Azure Storage is both elastic and massively scalable, allowing you to store and process small amounts of data for a company website, up to hundreds of terabytes of data required by scientific, financial, and media applications. This enables the design of applications for large global audiences which adapt with an auto-partitioning system that automatically load balances your data based on traffic. So where are we today? Today, Azure Storage stores tens of trillions of unique customer objects and handles millions of requests every second. With its best-in-breed elasticity, you can design applications for large, global audiences which scale as needed. This is both in terms of the amount of data stored and the number of requests made against it, all while only ever paying for what's consumed. The auto-partitioning system employed by Azure Storage automatically load balances your data based on traffic. This means that as the demands on your applications grow, Azure Storage automatically allocates the appropriate resources to meet demand. Furthermore, Azure Storage is accessible from anywhere in the world, from any type of application, whether it's running in the cloud or on the desktop, or even an on-premises server, mobile or tablet device. We begin by looking at blob storage. Now, blob storage, sometimes referred to as object storage, stores unstructured data such as documents, media files, or application installers. Similar to your existing general-purpose storage accounts, they share all of the great durability, availability, scalability, and performance features that you use today, including 100% API consistency. This storage service offers three types of blobs: block blobs, append blobs, and page blobs, which is specified during creation. Now, block blobs are optimized for streaming and storing cloud objects such as documents, media, and backups. Page blobs are optimized for IaaS disks supporting random writes. And finally, append blobs are optimized for append operations such as login. The table service is Microsoft's NoSQL key attribute store, utilizing the tabular format to store flexible datasets. This includes user data, address books, device information, and many other metadata types. Now, tables store data as collections of entities which are similar to rows. Each entity has a primary key and a set of properties that uniquely identify it, along with a timestamp that is used to track when the entity was last updated. It's important to note that the table service doesn't enforce a schema by default, which means that two entities in the same table may have different sets of properties unless enforced from the client side. Azure Queues provide a reliable messaging solution for asynchronous communication between application components. Now, these could be running in the cloud, on the desktop, or on an on-premises server, or even a mobile device. Messages typically have a small body with attributes such as a time to live, which are used for configuring the service and representing tasks created by the front-end producer, which are then in turn processed by the back-end consumer. Finally, Azure File Storage offers cloud-based encrypted SMB file shares, allowing customers to easily migrate legacy applications to Azure quickly and without costly rewrites. In addition to this, virtual machines and cloud services can share file data across application components and with on-premises applications via a simple file service REST API. Azure File Storage offers availability, scalability, and geo-redundancy, allowing you to confidently store your server data, log files, event data, and backups in the cloud. But what does it all mean? Let's try and put this into perspective. One of the largest and most recognizable adopters of Azure Storage is our own Xbox Live service. As you can see in the deck, we use a combination of binary large objects and table stores to log activity feeds, achievements, friend lists, and matchmaking solutions on a highly scalable, efficient, and reliable platform. When evaluating storage, it's also wise to be mindful of replication and high availability options. Now, the data in your Azure Storage account is always replicated. This ensures durability, high availability, and meets the SLA for storage even in the face of transient hardware failures. Locally redundant storage will maintain 3 copies of your data, which is triple replicated within a single facility and within a single region. This replication topology protects your data from normal hardware failures, but not from the failure of a facility, meaning that in the case of a regional disaster, data access could become compromised. The locally redundant storage is a great candidate for testing scenarios where enhanced, highly available data access is not critical. And because of this, it's offered at a discounted rate. Next, we have zone redundant storage, which maintains 3 copies of your data, triple replicated across 2 or more facilities. This can be either within a single region or across 2. Zone redundant storage is currently available for block blobs and provides the higher level of durability than LRS. Geo-redundant storage maintains 6 copies of your data. With GRS, your data is replicated 3 times within the primary region and then a further 3 times in a secondary region hundreds of miles away. This SKU provides the highest level of durability and therefore recommended by Microsoft for HA critical production workloads. Our final replication SKU is Read Access Geo-redundant and is enabled for your storage account by default. Read Access Geo-redundant storage replicates your data to a secondary geographic location as per standard GRS, but also provides read access to the secondary data for certain workloads. Your total cost of storage depends on how much data you store, the volume type, storage transactions, and outbound data transfers. Prices will also change depending on data redundancy options. Let's take a look at the options available. So let's click on our calculator. And from there, it will change focus into Azure Storage pricing. Now, if we scroll down, we can see that we've got locally redundant storage, zone redundant storage, geo-redundant storage, and read access geo-redundant storage. From there, we can also choose our storage type, our region, and our currency. And again, we've got blobs, files, disks, tables, and queues. Let's leave it with blobs. So if we come down into blobs storage account, you can see that we have a number of storage prices, and this is based on locally redundant storage, geo-redundant storage, read access geo-redundant storage, and also whether the data is hot or cool. And you can see that the prices start from pennies per month. If we look at the access prices, again, there are costs associated with data retrieval and data writes. And also we have options in there for importing and exporting large amounts of data. And then this can be done by exporting your data onto hard disks, shipping them to Microsoft, and they will extract them into a storage account. So again, that's where we see the information about the pricing. We will come back, we will use the calculator, and we will work out the price for our Contoso fictitious company later on in the session. So at this point, I'm jumping back into our subscription. You can see that our CSP virtual machine 1 has now been created and is running. If I click on that blade, again, we can see some familiar things when it loads. Then we've got our activity log, our access control, our tags. We can diagnose and solve problems. But from here, we can see that we've also got the ability to add disks. We've got the ability to drill down into our network interfaces to dynamically change the size. We've got our automation script. As we come down, we can see that we've got metrics for the machine, diagnostic settings. We've got the diagram that we can look at, and that will show us all of the components of that resource. So we just wait for that to load up. And again, we can see we've got the virtual machine, we've got the disk, we've got the network cards in there. Now you'll notice that Connect is disabled for that virtual machine, and there's a very good reason for that. If we go back over up to overview, you'll notice that Connect is disabled. And the reason Connect is disabled is because we didn't decide that we wanted a public IP address. So in order to connect into this public IP address, we're going to have to go in via the private IP address, which has been assigned to it. Now to find that, if I come down to the network interface, we can see that this virtual machine is actually been assigned 192.168.10.4. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this to one side. I'm going to come down into a remote desktop connection, and I'm going to connect into 192.168.10.4. Now at that point, it's going to go across my VPN connection. Okay, so we've got our VPN connection, which we're going to traverse across, and at that point, it's going to enable me to authenticate into that machine. So let's just try that again. So okay, so we're just waiting for that to initialize. I'm going to connect in with my password. And at that point, do we want to trust this machine? Yes, we do. And we can see that we now have the 192.168.10.4 using the student username and password that we've just created, and that machine will initialize. Now, the reason it wasn't allowing me to log on initially is the machine was still configuring and booting up. So we can see that that's now running. Everything appears to be fine on there. We can go in, we can navigate throughout the task pads. So let's close that connection and look at some of the other options. So from here, as we said before, we've got the size, and we can go in and we can dynamically scale that machine if need be. Let's just wait for this to load up. Again, we have the option to increase that size if need be. I can come down, I can look at my metrics. I've got, as we've seen before, the diagram, but I can also look at things like diagnostic settings. So I can go in and I can query that machine, and I can look at what diagnostic settings I want. Do I want them to be verbose, information, warning, errors, criticals, or so on? If I come down, I've got my resource health, which will give me an overview of what's going on with Azure, but also any things that could be going on with my virtual machines. I have the ability to reset passwords if I can't log on to that machine. I also have boot diagnostics that enable me to go in and get a log of what's going on with that computer, along with a screenshot to show me the current state of that virtual machine. Okay, so at this point, let's close that down and let's just clean this up a little bit. So we'll do a 2x1. We'll move that across on our dashboard. And I just want to go back into my resource group to show you the new components. So we can see, look, we've got a virtual machine, but we've also got the virtual network interface card. We've got the network security group that we created. But we've also now got those two storage accounts. We've got one for the virtual machine disk, and we've got one for our diagnostics. So let's take a look at this storage account. If I go into the virtual machine disk, from here, you can see that I've got, again, activity logs, access control, tags, diagnostics, but I've also got the ability to go in and set encryption, access keys to access it. So let's quickly click on our access keys. You can see we have 2 keys for redundancy, but I can also assign temporary access to this storage account via a shared access signature. And at that point, I can go in there and specify what I want people to be able to access and for how long. I can also go in and I can access the configuration, whether it's standard or premium, and the replication of it. If I go back into overview, I can see that this particular storage account has a container in there for VHDs. And if I go into the VHD container, you can see that I've got my Cloud and Proud virtual machine VHD, which is a page blob, which is effectively the VM disk for the virtual machine that we've just created. Now, at any point, I can go back in and I can create a new storage account. So if I go into everything, if I look for storage account, we can see that it's my top option. From there, I can go ahead and select storage account. I might want to go in and call this course files. Now, you have to make sure that it's unique, so someone's already used this. So if we try CSP course files, maybe we can see that that's fine. Are we going to use the deployment model, resource manager, or classic? Well, we don't really use classic anymore, so we're going to use resource manager. And what is it for? Is this for general purpose or is it for blob storage? I'm going to say it's for blob storage. I want standard performance and I want it to be geo-redundant storage. So remember, that's the 3 local copies, but then the 3 remote copies too. I want it to be hot and not cold. This is typically used for less frequently accessed data and is slower. We want storage service encryption set to disabled. And again, I'm going to use my Visual Studio Enterprise subscription. I'm going to place it into the CSP Workshop resource group, which is located in North Europe. So at that point, I can pin that to dashboard. That's going to go ahead and create. And that will take a moment or two, but once that's created, we can go ahead and start investigating some of the things that we can do on this storage account. So I'm just going to pause the video and we'll come back when it's created. And we're back. We can see that our course file storage account has been created. At the moment, there's no containers in there. But if we look at our essentials, again, we can see the resource group, the status, the location, the subscription, and so on. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and create a container. Now, I want to call this media files. Okay, so I'm going to create a new one called media files. Do I want this to be private or do I want to allow public access to it? I'm going to say that this is for private access and I'm going to go ahead and say create. Now at that point, we can see that I've successfully created my container. I've got a unique URL for it. And if I go ahead and click on the container, you can see that I've got no blobs in there. So at that point, it's going to allow me to set up my access policy, go into the properties, or even upload resources into it. So at that point, I can go ahead and select the file. I can select the type of object that it's going to be and the block size. I've also got the option to download storage explorers, which will give me a GUI front end and enable me to connect into this resource. So at this point, we've built our virtual network, our gateway, our VPN, our storage, and our virtual machine. What I want to do now is I want to look at designing and understanding what web apps are about, or application services. Now, Azure App Service is a cloud service that is designed to solve the practical problems that engineers face today. App services focus on providing superior developer productivity without compromising on the need to deliver applications at cloud scale. App services also provide this feature and frameworks that are necessary for creating enterprise line of business applications while supporting developers with the most popular development languages. Now, this includes things like .NET, Java, PHP, Node.js, and Python. So with app services, developers can build highly scalable web apps. We can quickly build mobile app backends with an easy set of mobile capabilities such as user authentication and push notifications. We can implement, deploy, and publish API apps, and we can tie business applications together into workflows and transform data with logic apps. In this section, we will focus on web apps. Now, web apps are a fully managed compute platform that is optimized for hosting websites and web applications. This platform as a service offering will let us focus on our business logic while Azure takes care of the infrastructure to run and scale as needed. So the following lists some of the reasons why an enterprise may consider using web apps. Firstly, multiple language and frameworks. App Service has first-class support for ASP.NET, Node.js, Java, PHP, and Python. We can also run PowerShell and other scripts or executables on the App Service VM. In terms of DevOps optimization, we can set up continuous integration and deployment with Visual Studio Team services. We can integrate with GitHub and Bitbucket. This allows us to promote updates through test and staging environments, perform A/B testing. We can manage our apps in app services by using Azure PowerShell or even the cross-platform command line interface, which is now available. We have global scale with high availability, enabling us to scale up or scale out manually or automatically. It also enables us to host our apps anywhere in the Microsoft Global Data Center infrastructure with high availability. Next, we have connections to SaaS platforms and on-premises data. We can choose from more than 50 connectors for enterprise systems such as SAP, Oracle, and services such as Salesforce and Office 365. We also have internet services connectors such as Facebook and Twitter integration, as well as access on-premise data using hybrid connections and Azure Virtual Networks. We have security and compliance with ISO, SOC, and PCI compliance certificates. We have application templates from an extensive list of applications in the Azure Marketplace. And we have Visual Studio integration with dedicated tools that streamline the work of creating, deploying, and debugging. App services bring together everything you need to create web and mobile apps from any platform and, more importantly, any device. The free and shared plans allow you to host your apps in a shared environment, while basic, standard, and premium plans provide virtual machines dedicated to your service. You can host multiple apps and domains in each instance you deploy within your plan. Now, the free and shared service plans are ideal for experimenting with the platform and for development and test scenarios. We use the free plan to quickly evaluate our platform and convert the app at any time to one of the paid plans without delays or downtime. The shared plan allows you to develop and test in an environment with features such as secure socket layer, domain names, and more before production, and is suitable for low traffic sites. Now, free and shared plans are metered on a per app basis rather than a per instance basis, as is the case with basic, shared, and premium. Let's look at these three tiers in more detail. Now, the basic service plan is designed for apps that have lower traffic requirements and do not need more advanced auto scale and traffic manager features. Pricing is based on the size and the number of virtual machine instances that you run. Built-in network load balancing support automatically distributes traffic across the VM instances. With the standard service plan designed for production, API, mobile, and web apps. There are no limits on the number of apps, domains that you can host using the standard service plan. Pricing is based on the size and the number of VM instances you run. Built-in network load balancing support automatically distributes traffic across the VM instances. The standard plan includes built-in auto-scale support that can automatically adjust the number of VM instances running to match your traffic needs. It also includes built-in backup support where needed. Finally, we have the premium service plan designed for production apps. The premium plan supports larger numbers of scale instances, additional connectors, and BizTalk capabilities, while still including the advanced capabilities found in the standard plan. The premium plan also offers the availability to create app service environments which provide full isolation and operate in the customer's virtual network, scaling up to 50 instances. So at this point, let's jump into our portal and go ahead and build a new app service plan. So again, I'm going to go up into my resource group. I'm going to click on add, and what I'm looking for is a web app. Okay, we can see that we have a web app here. I'm going to select the top one, so web app. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and hit create. Now again, as we go through, it's going to want to know a number of questions. So the first thing it's going to want to know is my app service name. So I'm going to call this CSP Workshop. I'm going to use my Visual Studio with MSDN in my CSP Workshop resource group. And from there, I'm going to select a new app service plan. So if I click on my app service plan, I'm going to click create new. And from here, I want to select one which is in North Europe. So I'm going to select North Europe. I'm going to call this CSP app service plan. So CSP ASP, which it's happy with. At that point, we're going to select our pricing tier. Now, again, if we click on View All, we said that there are a number of options. We've got free, we've got shared, we've got basic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say basic. Now, basic is going to give me one core machine with 1.75 gigabytes of RAM, up to 10 gigabytes of storage. It will allow a secure socket layer certificate, a custom domain, and up to 3 instances. So at that point, I'm going to go ahead and select, and I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to keep application insights off, and I'm going to choose to pin that to the dashboard. So we're going to go ahead. That's going to take a minute or two to create. So I'll pause the video, and when we come back, we'll have a look at what that app service plan has actually done. Okay, and we're back. And from here, we can see some familiar blades. We've got our activity log, our access control, tags, diagnose and solve problems. But you see, we've also got things like deployment slots now, which will allow me to create multiple instances of this resource and allow me to swap them once I'm happy with the changes. We can see that I've got application settings. So if I scroll down, we can see that I want what version of .NET Framework, the version of PHP, the version of Java, the platform, WebSockets. We can see that I want auto swap turned on, debugging turned on, and so on. I can look at authentication and authorization. I can look at setting up backups for this app service. I can set up custom domain names, SSL certificates. I can look at the networking connections here. So do I want it connected to my VNet? Do I want hybrid connections in there? Do I want an app service environment? I can scale up. I can choose to scale out. I can install things like tinfoil security. Okay, I can also go in. If I scroll down, we can see that I can clone the application. I can do things like launch a console into my web app. So from my actual Azure portal, I can go in and start configuring this machine. I've got the option to go in and do performance tests, add extensions in there, and so on. So again, very, very powerful for our developers. So what I'm going to do at this stage is I'm going to go into Overview. And under Overview, I'm going to come over to More. And what I want to do is I want to get a publishing profile. And that's going to download a publishing profile into my Downloads folder. Now, what this is going to enable me to do is it's going to enable me to upload a web page. And it's going to be uploaded into this URL. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this URL. It's going to open up a new tab. And it's going to tell me, look, I've got a web app running, but there's nothing in there. At this point, I'm going to jump into Visual Studio. Now, what I've done on Visual Studio is I've just gone ahead and said File, and I've opened a new website. And you'll find that in your C Cloud and Proud folder, you've got a website that's hosted in there. Now, it's not a very exciting website. If I go ahead and double click this index.html, and we choose to run this, let's run it without debugging. You can see that it's just powered by Azure. We've got a visit the website. It's not doing a great deal. Okay, so back into my Visual Studio. I'm going to go ahead and I've made a change just to CSP Workshop series just so you can see the change. I'm going to go ahead and OK that. Now at that point, just get this like that. At that point, I'm going to right click my website and I'm going to choose to publish this web app. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose to publish this web app by connecting into a new profile connection. So I'm going to choose to import and I'm going to browse to that CSP Workshop publish settings file that we just downloaded. If I hit OK and next and publish, what it will do is that will now connect into Azure. It's going to upload my web app, and at that point it will be available on that URL. So we're just going to give that a moment. We can see that it's adding all the ACLs. Now under the CSP Workshop, we now have our Powered by Azure CSP Workshop series by Azure Dan, which will then launch us into the Cloud and Proud website. Okay, and that's all gone up by using that publish profile setting. Okay, if I now come back into my CSP Workshop, I could again start adding SSL certificates and custom domains in there. Now, one of the other things that I might want to do on here is add a deployment slot. Now, a deployment slot, if I go in and add, enables me to create a dev slot. Okay, now if I create a dev slot, what this enables me to do is it effectively creates another instance of that web page or the app service plan. So if I go into my dev slot, you can see that I can again download the published profile. That will download into my downloads folder, and I'm going to go back into here and I'm just going to change this into Dev CSP Workshop Series. Now at this point, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and publish that web app. I'm going to go back up to connection or back up to profile, and I'm going to import this time the dev slot publish settings profile. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and publish my updated page into the slot, and then what we can do is we can see how we've now got two instances. So this is just going up. That's now done. So we've got our CSP dev slot. And if I go back into my overview and back into this URL, we can see that we've also got the standard one. So CSP Workshop, and we've got, let's move that across, CSP. Let's bring up the dev one again. So if I go into my deployment slots, if I click on dev slot, I've got a URL in there. So you can see I've got my dev slot and I've got my standard slot. Now, once I'm happy with this dev slot, what I can actually do is I can go in and swap those deployment slots around. And what it effectively does is changes the public IP address. So if I go in and hit swap, it's going to say, what do you want to do? I want to swap dev slot with production. If I go ahead and say OK, what it now does is it initializes a VIP change, so my development website goes into production and vice versa. Now, when that's done, if I come back into this original one and hit a refresh, we should see it change at the bottom. And we can see that that's the case. So under the CSP one, we now have dev. Under the dev, we now have CSP. So that swap has been successful. Organizations need a business continuity disaster recovery strategy that determines how applications, workloads, and the data stay running and available during planned and unplanned downtime. They also need a strategy that allows workloads to recover to normal working conditions as soon as possible after an event. Now, Microsoft offer a number of solutions to ensure a successful BCDR strategy, and in this section we will focus on the two predominant technologies, that being Azure Backup and Azure Site Recovery. Azure Backup allows you to back up data to the Microsoft Cloud. It replaces your existing on-premises or off-site backup solution with a cloud-based tool that is reliable, secure, and cost-competitive. It also helps you protect assets that run inside the cloud and provides recovery services built on a world-class infrastructure that is scalable, durable, and highly available. Azure Site Recovery contributes to your BCDR strategy by orchestrating replication of on-premises physical servers and virtual machines to a cloud or secondary data center. When outages occur in your primary location, you fail over to the secondary location and keep applications and workloads available. You can then fail back to your primary location when normal operation resumes. We use Azure Backup to protect our data by backing it up to the Microsoft Cloud. Data can be anything from a single file or folder up to the largest of data centers. Azure Backup can be used in conjunction with Windows Client Operating Systems, Windows Server, System Center Data Protection Manager, as well as SharePoint, Exchange, SQL Server, Hyper-V, and Azure IaaS virtual machines running both Windows and Linux. Let's take a look at some of the key features. First, we have automatic storage management, with no need for capital expenditure for on-premises storage devices. Azure Backup automatically allocates and manages backup storage with a pay-as-you-use consumption model. Next, we have unlimited scaling, whereby we can take advantage of high availability guarantees with Azure's non-intrusive auto-scaling capabilities. We have multiple storage options, such as locally redundant storage and geo-replication storage. We have unlimited data transfers with no charge for egress data during a restore operation. On top of that, we have data encryption that allows for secure transmission and storage of customer data in the public cloud. We have application consistent backups that help ensure that fixes are not needed at the time of restore. This reduces recovery time objectives and allows customers to return to a running state more quickly. And finally, we have long-term retention of data. Site Recovery is an Azure service that contributes to your BCDR strategy by orchestrating replication for on-premises physical servers and virtual machines to either the cloud or to a secondary data center. When outages occur in your primary location, you fail over to the secondary location to keep apps and workloads available. You fail back to your primary location when it returns to normal operations. But why use Site Recovery? Well, here's some compelling reasons. Firstly, we can simplify your BCDR strategy. Site Recovery makes it easy to handle replication, failover, and recovery of multiple business workloads and apps from a single location. Site Recovery orchestrates replication and failover, but doesn't intercept your application data or have any information about it. Next, we provide flexible replication. Using Site Recovery, you can replicate workloads running on Hyper-V virtual machines, VMware virtual machines, and Windows and Linux physical servers. Next, we provide easy failover and recovery. So Site Recovery provides test failovers to support disaster recovery drills without affecting production environments. You can also run planned failovers with zero data loss for expected outages, or unplanned failovers with minimal data loss depending on replication frequency. After failover, you can fail back to your primary sites. Site Recovery provides recovery plans that can include scripts and Azure automation workbooks so you can customize failover and recovery of multi-tier applications. Next, we eliminate secondary data centers. You can replicate to a secondary on-premises site or to Azure. But by using Azure as a destination for disaster recovery, you'll eliminate the cost and complexity of maintaining a secondary site, and replicated data is stored in Azure storage with all the resilience that provides. Finally, you can integrate with existing BCDR technologies. Site Recovery partners with other application BCDR features. For example, you can use Site Recovery to protect the SQL Server backend of a corporate workload, including native support for SQL Server Always On to manage the failover of availability groups. When pricing your backup solution, it's important to note there are two components to consider. First, you have the protected instances. Now, this is the primary billing unit for Azure Backup, where customers pay for the number of instances that are protected within the Azure Backup service. But you'll also need to consider any storage consumed, and customers will be able to choose from locally redundant storage or geo-redundant storage for their backup vault. It's also important to note that Azure Site Recovery is free for the first 31 days, excluding any storage consumed. So what we'll do is let's take a look at these on the pricing page. So I'm going to go into the backup page first. And under backup pricing, if we come down, we can see that the price of Azure Backup is dependent on the size of each protected instance plus any storage consumed. Instances up to 50 gigabytes of data in British pounds will cost just over £3 per protected instance. Larger instances between 50 and 500 gigabytes up to £6, and then greater than 500 gigabytes, it's going to be in increments of £6.10p per 500 gigabytes. If we come back, if we then look at the site recovery calculator, that's a slightly different model. Now, again, it's free for the first 31 days. Then if you're backing up to a customer-owned site, it's going to cost you £9.77 per instance. If you are backing up to Azure, it's going to cost you £15.27 per instance per month. Also important to know that Azure Site Recovery is building units of the average daily number of instances that you are protecting over that monthly period. For example, if you are consistently protecting 20 instances for the first half of the month and then none for the second half of the month, your average daily number of protected instances would be 10 for that month duration. So what we'll do is we're now going to jump into our portal, and we're going to take a look at creating a BCDR solution. So let's go ahead and build a backup vault. So I'm going to go into my resource group, and from here I'm going to click on add to launch into my marketplace. Now from here I'm going to search for backup, and I want to select this backup and site recovery OMS solution. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to go ahead and hit create. Now it's going to want to know a name for it, so I'm going to call this CSP backup. It's happy with that name, so I'm going to use my existing subscription. I'm going to put it into my existing resource group, which is going to be in North Europe. So we'll go ahead and pin that to dashboard and hit create. Now, that's going to take about a minute to create. So what I'll do is I'll pause the video and we'll come back in a moment. And we're back, and we can see that under overview, we've got our essentials like before, where we can see the resource group, we can see the location, the subscription, and so on. But what's nice about this pane is it will show us the backups in the last 24 hours, any site recovery statuses, and then we've got a little bit more information. So under backup, we can see our backup items, our usage and jobs. Under site recovery, we can see any replicated items, recovery plans, and site recovery jobs. Now, as we come over to the left-hand side, we can see that we've got some familiar settings, so properties, locks, automation script. But what's nice about this are these wizards here. So we've got a wizard for backup and a wizard for site recovery. If I click on backup, it's going to ask us what our backup goal is. So are we backing up our workload running in Azure? If so, is it a virtual machine? Are we backing up a workload that's on premises? And then if we look at this, it's going to change focus and say, well, is it files and folders? Is it Hyper-V? Is it VMware, SQL, SharePoint, Exchange, System State, or even bare metal recoveries? Whatever I choose then affects the next stage. So if I go ahead and say files and folders and hit OK, you'll see that it then changes. At this point, it wants me to install the recovery service agent and download the vault credentials so I can do the initial pairing of the machine to the service. If I click back and then click on Site Recovery, you'll see that this is a wizard-driven menu too. So the first thing that it wants me to do is to prepare my infrastructure. If I look at my protection goal, where do I want to replicate our virtual machines? Am I replicating to Azure? Am I replicating to a secondary recovery site? If I go ahead and say I'm recovering to Azure, then are your virtual machines virtualized? We can say yes, they're virtualized with Hyper-V or VMware vSphere, or they're not. We can say that they are bare metal. If I say yes with Hyper-V, are you using System Center to manage your Hyper-V host? And we can say, in this instance, no, we're not. So if I go ahead and say OK, it then changes to the source. Now at this point, it wants me to go in and prepare the source, so install Hyper-V sites and Hyper-V servers, and then connect to the target and build that replication pairing. If we come back down, we can see that we can monitor our jobs. We've got alerts and events that we can monitor. We've also got backup policies that we can create. So by default, I've got my default policy in there, but I can go in and I can click add. And at that point, I can go in and I can set my retention range for my days, weeks, months, or even years. If we come down, we can then see our protected items, and that will be listed in here. We can see our replicated items, but we've also got the ability to manage our infrastructure. So if I look at site recovery infrastructure, you can see that I can then start managing my virtual machine manager servers, my network mappings, my replication policies, as well as for VMware configuration and replication policies. For Hyper-V sites, I can set up my Hyper-V sites, my hosts, and replication policies for those machines. If I come down to backup infrastructure, I can look at my backup configuration. And if I go into my backup configuration, we'll just wait for that to wake up. There we go. I can choose whether it's going to be locally redundant or geo-redundant. I can look at my backup management servers. I can look at my production servers, which will be all listed here. So you can see that using this recovery service vault, we get a really comprehensive tool that allows us to manage a wealth of different workloads. The last component of our solution that I want to discuss is a security center. Now, security center helps you prevent, detect, and respond to threats with increased visibility into and control over the security of your Azure resources. It provides integrated security monitoring and policy management across your Azure subscriptions. It helps detect threats that might otherwise go unnoticed and works with a broad ecosystem of security solutions. Even with the best protection in place, attackers continue to evolve and advance. Azure Security Center helps you keep up with this changing threat landscape by detecting threats as they happen. Now, we do this by applying machine learning to the signals we collect from your deployments, and by comparing those signals with the global threat intelligence we are uniquely positioned to gather by virtue of being one of the biggest players in the internet. So let's take a look at some of the Security Center's many benefits. The first benefit is we can take control of cloud security. We can define policies for our Azure subscriptions according to our company's cloud security needs. This can be tailored to the type of applications or sensitivity to the data in each subscription. We can use policy-driven recommendations to guide resource owners through the process of implementing required controls, which takes the guesswork out of cloud security. Next, we can easily deploy integrated cloud security solutions. We can rapidly enable a range of security solutions from both Microsoft and its partners, including industry-leading firewalls and anti-malware. We can use streamlined provisioning to easily deploy security solutions where even networking changes are configured for us. On top of this, security events from partner solutions are automatically collected for analysis and alerting. We can detect threats and respond fast. Staying ahead of current and emerging cloud threats requires an integrated, analytic-driven approach. By combining Microsoft Global Threat Intelligence and expertise with insights into cloud security-related events across our deployments, Azure Security Center helps you detect actual threats early, reducing false positives. Finally, we can find and deploy popular applications from trusted partners in the Azure Marketplace. This may be things like Barracuda, Checkpoint Firewall, and so on. Azure Security Center is offered in two tiers, free and standard, which is charged at around £9 per node per month and offers advanced threat detection and behavioral analysis. The Security Center uses Azure Storage to save security data generated from your protected nodes. Costs associated with storage will obviously be charged separately. Okay, so let's jump back into the portal and take a look at our Security Center. So I'm going to come up to Security Center. And from here, if we look down the left-hand side, we can see we've got overview. And from there, it's going to give us a quick overview of our resource security health. It's going to show us some recommendations, but give us links to partner solutions, policies, and quick start. We'll come back to this in a moment. If I come down, we can see my security policy, and I can look at my policies for my subscriptions. If I come down, I've got my quick start guide where I can go in and look at certain documentation. I've got my welcome, which will initially set up Security Center or take me back into the section. Under recommendations, it's telling me what Security Center has already flagged on my machine. So it's saying that I should install endpoint protection on my CSP VM1, and I need to provide some security contact details for my subscriptions. From there, I can go down to partner solutions, and I've also got security alerts that I can check and filter. If I go back to overview, if we look at prevention, we can see that virtual machine's there, and that's currently red. Now, if I click on the virtual machine, it's going to give me a breakdown of what's going on. So I can see that my CSP VM1 is monitored. It does have the latest system updates, but there are vulnerabilities, and the vulnerability is it doesn't have endpoint protection. Now, if I click on the recommendations, what Security Center will do is flag the problem, but also invite me to install the solution. So it's monitored, it's detected, and now it's proactively correcting that issue. So I'm going to go ahead and choose to install on VM1. Now, at that point, it's going to ask me, what endpoint protection do I want to use? Do I want to use the Microsoft solution, or do I want to go for one of our partners? I'm going to choose to use the Microsoft solution. I'm going to go ahead and hit create. Now, at this point, it wants to know, do I want to set up any scanning policies, the type of scan that I want to do, the day that I want to do it, and the time. Are there any locations that I want to exclude? I'm going to go ahead and accept the defaults. So I'm going to say OK, and then what will happen is that endpoint protection has now begun installing on CSP VM1. With that happening, let's go down and look at some of our partner solutions. So again, if I go into partner solutions, no solutions were found, but what I can do is I can go ahead and I can add additional ones that are flagged. Now, this may be the case where if I go in, if I look at a virtual network, for instance, it may need to tell me that I need a network security group to be done. The reason it isn't being flagged is because when we created that virtual machine, because we were tunneling over a VPN going into a gateway, I removed all of the public IP addresses. So Security Center doesn't really consider that to be a risk at that time. If I come down and click on policies, again, we can go in and we can look at the information about our subscriptions. If I click on one of these, I can choose whether or not I want to inherit the settings, whether I want to collect data. At that point, I can also look at my prevention policies, my email notifications, and pricing tiers that I've chosen to use. Okay, so up until this point, we have focused on the technology, and we should now have a good understanding of the components that we may want to use in our solution. But now I want to focus on the tools that we can use to firstly size the solution and then price the components. We will begin with the Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit. The Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit is an inventory, assessment, and reporting tool that helps you assess your current IT infrastructure and determine the right Microsoft technologies for your IT needs. The MAP Toolkit uses WMI, Active Directory, SMS providers, and other technologies to collect data in your environment and inventory computer hardware, software, and operating systems without having to install any agent software on the target computers. The data and analysis provided by MAP streamline the planning process for software migration, help assess device driver availability, and allow you to make hardware upgrade recommendations. The MAP Toolkit also gathers performance metrics from computers you are considering for virtualization and includes a feature to model a library of potential host and storage hardware configurations. You can use the MAP Toolkit for a number of solutions, such as simplifying the planning process for migration to Windows 10, Windows Server, Office 365, Hyper-V, and the Windows Azure platform. So let's go ahead and jump into the tool. Now, I've already downloaded this tool, the Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit. But if you go into a browser, if you search for Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit, you'll see that you can download it from the official Microsoft location. So I've already gone ahead and done this. On top of that, I've downloaded all the sample databases too. So at that point, let's jump back into the tool. Now, as I said, I've downloaded the sample databases. One of the first things that you would have done is you would have performed your initial assessment. So you would have gone in, you would have created a new database, and at that point you would have gone off and scanned your environment using Windows Management Instrumentation, Active Directory, and so on. So I've already done that. With that information collected, you'll see that we've got a number of scenarios. So we've got cloud, we've got desktop, we've got server, we've got desktop virtualization, server virtualization, database, usage tracking, and environment. We want to focus on cloud, which breaks it down into a number of sections. So we can see that our data has been collected, our performance data has been collected, we have a hardware configuration, and it's also suggesting some private clouds in there too. Now that will be using Azure Pack as opposed to Azure Stack, but that will change in later updates. So if I look at Azure VM readiness, I can go in and I can see that I've got 283 Windows machines, 142 are ready, 141 will be ready after changes. We can also see that we've got no Linux machines ready and 14 will need some sort of change in there. Now what we can also do is we can come up and we can generate a VM readiness report. So if I go ahead and click on the link, it's going to create a report for me. And if I hit close, you'll see at this point, I now have an Excel spreadsheet that I can link into, which is going to give me a summary and then a comprehensive breakdown of an assessment result for my Windows servers and my Linux machines. Okay, so I get more detailed breakdown. If I come back and hit back, you can see that I can also look at virtual machine capacity, so I can look at what's been sized. So 226 Windows-based machines, 3 Linux-based machines, and it's coming up saying that I need some A7s, some A60s, some A5s. It's specified some large virtual machines, medium and small in there too. If I go back, we can also see that I've got Office 365. Now, if I click on Office 365, it's going to tell me about full client readiness. It's going to specify my web apps. It's going to specify Exchange Online and SharePoint Online readiness. And again, it's going to invite me to generate a report that will give me greater detail on what's being assessed. So I can look at my system requirements, I can look at my Office web apps, Exchange, Office 365 client assessments, and application summary. So another tool that people are now getting excited about is the total ownership calculator at azurewebsites.net. What this tool does is it takes into account the machines that you're running, be it physical, be it virtual, but then allows you to make assumptions based on electricity rates, ground rent, and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and start now, and it wants to start off with some assumptions. So is our environment physical servers or are they virtual machines? I'm going to go ahead and say physical servers, and I'm going to say that they're located in Europe North and that I want to price these in British pounds. So I'm going to select British pound. Then under compute, I'm going to say that we want Windows-based machines. I'm going to have a server of, let's say we've got 20 servers, and in terms of processors, let's say we've got 4 processors per server, each processor having 2 cores. I'm going to say 28 gig of RAM, and computer activity I'm going to say is average. In terms of disk storage, I'm going to say they're SSDs, and my 20 servers are perhaps using, let's say, 20 terabytes of data. Outbound bandwidth per month, I'm going to go ahead and say 5 terabytes. And again, I can go ahead and add rows in there or remove rows if I need to. Now with that done, I want to go ahead and make some assumptions. We can see that I've got my processors down there. So I've got some hardware costs that I might want to put in. I've got some software costs that I might want to put in. I've got some electricity costs that I might want to account for, data center costs that I might want to put in, network hardware and software costs, disk storage costs, IT labor costs, and virtualization costs. And once I've considered all of those assumptions, I'm going to go ahead and hit calculate. And at that point, it's going to give me a breakdown of what's going on in that environment. So I can see, you know, my on-premise cost breakdown summary is coming up at this cost, and then my Azure cost breakdown summary we can see is significantly less if I'm doing it with EA pricing or and even web direct costs. So at that point we get a breakdown of the costs over 3 years. Okay, and with each of these, I can go out and I can choose to export this and I can choose to print. So just exporting that out now, we can then load that into Excel. And we can see that I've got my total cost of ownership calculator, which gives me a nice breakdown from the website. So now we've looked at some of the sizing and calculators out there on the web. What I want to do is I want to start looking at understanding the Microsoft Azure pricing calculator. The Microsoft Azure pricing calculator comes in two flavors: the public calculator, which aligns to direct web costings, and the channel pricing calculator for partners, which is secured by a login and accommodates markup to estimates. Both tools are aligned to Azure categorization and allow custom naming and exporting to spreadsheets. To understand the calculator, let's take another look at our fictitious company and begin pricing the solution inside the calculator. Now we need to take into account the virtual network gateway, public IP addresses, virtual machines, premium storage, our web app, our backup solution, and any bandwidth and egress data charges. Let's take a look. Okay, so I've come into azure.microsoft.com, I've clicked on pricing, and from there we've launched the pricing calculator. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and add some items. Now, the first thing that I want to do is I want to come down and I want to add some compute. So under this, I want to select virtual machines. We can see that virtual machines have been added. Now, our virtual machines are going to need some storage, so I'm going to go ahead and select storage. On top of this, we want to look at networking. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I want a VPN gateway. I'm also going to put some bandwidth in there. I'm going to come down to web and mobile, and I want to put an app service plan in there. And if we come down, we might want to put some backup in there. And under security identity, let's go ahead and put Azure Active Directory in there. And we're going to go ahead and select the Security Center too. So with those components added, let's close down this and we can see that we've got all of those components added into the calculator. So from here, I can go ahead and I can rename it this. So I can say Contoso Virtual Machines. And I'm going to go ahead and select the region. So I'm going to say North Europe. They're going to be Windows-based machines. I'm going to say that the pricing tier is going to be standard. And what I want to do is I want to pick some D3 machines. Let's just scroll this down a little bit. So I'm going to select some D3 machines. I want 2 instances. And I'm going to keep them running for 744 hours. So they're going to be continually on for the best part of the month. Now at that point, we're going to come down to storage. I'm going to select again North Europe. Then what I want to do here is I want to select page blob and disk. The pricing tier, I want to choose premium SSDs. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and say I want P10s, so 128 gigabytes. And I'm going to go ahead and say that I want 6 of these. As we scroll down, I'm going to say I want a VPN gateway. The VPN gateway, again, is in North Europe. I want it as a basic VPN, but I could choose standard high performance. But let's actually go for standard. I'm going to say that the gateway is going to be running for 744 hours. And outbound traffic, we're going to choose VPN. And I'm going to say that I'm going to support 500 gigabytes of outbound traffic on that VPN gateway. Now, if I scroll down, I also want to account for some external bandwidth data to maybe connect to applications. Again, I'm going to say North Europe. I'm going to say that I want maybe, and let's be extravagant, let's say we want 2 terabytes of data. For my app service, I'm going to go ahead and say that I want it in North Europe. I want, we scroll down, I'm going to go ahead and say that I want an instance size of, let's go for a B1, and I want 2 instances of that are continually running. I can also choose the tier as well. So I'm going to go into standard. Okay, and we'll keep it as S1, 2 instances at 744 hours. I can also at this point choose whether or not I want SSL connections in there, but I'm going to leave that at this point. Under backup, I'm going to go ahead and say North Europe, I want 2 instances protected, and that's going to be around 256 gigabytes. I want storage to be locally redundant storage, and again, that's coming out at £7.51 a month. Actually, let's knock that up a little bit more. Let's knock that up to 800 gigabytes. So again, at that point, it's going to be £25 a month for the backup and then £23 a month for the storage, coming at around £50. For Azure Active Directory, I'm going to go ahead and say North Europe. I'm going to choose the basic tier, and from there I can choose whether I want multi-factor authentication. I'm going to leave that as a default for 10 users. Do I want business to consumer? Do I want business to business? Do I want any domain services in there? And again, these are all options that I can choose. Finally, I want to go ahead and select my security center. I'm going to go ahead and say standard. I'm going to do it for 2 nodes. And at that point, I'm going to get a breakdown of £928.22 as an estimated monthly cost. So at this point, I've got the option to go in and choose my support options. I can choose whether I want the included basic support tier, whether I want developer, standard, or professional direct. I'm going to go ahead and export that estimate. And with that done, we can open that up in Excel and we can get a breakdown of what the costs of those machines should be each month. And we can see that our monthly total is going to be £928.22 with an annual total of £11,138.67. In today's session, we've looked at how to size and price an IaaS solution in addition to understanding the technologies involved. As we wind down the course, I would ask you to remember the following key takeaways. That is, virtual machines are built on a prorated minute. You pay for a VM when it's in an allocated state. Even a shutdown VM can still be allocated and therefore billable. We need to ensure, therefore, that a VM is in a deprovisioned state when not being used. When pricing, remember all storage other than the volatile temp disk is billable, and we should account for egress data when calculating costs. So in our next session, we will look at building our solution for Contoso. If you're interested in beginning your own cloud journey or building on top of the systems already in place, then I would encourage you to take my free step-by-step training series at www.cloudandproud.info. Working together and over the course of a number of interactive sessions, we will build a working company and explore many of the new features offered by the Microsoft Cloud. This will in turn prepare you for certification and build confidence in what you're able to achieve.